All right, good morning and welcome to our third annual Sacramento Summit. Thank you for starting your day with us and joining virtually. My name is Lexie Gritlefeld and I am live from Mammoth Lakes, California in the Eastern Sierra, which is Northern Paiute native land. I'm the membership coordinator and sole staff member at California Outdoor Recreation Partnership, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to our virtual advocacy day. We are grateful to have 150 advocates join together in support of the same cause. Before we begin, I want to give a warm welcome to all of you and thank our board of directors at California Outdoor Recreation Partnership. Matt Lyon, Eric Raymond, Danica Carey, Kenji Harotunian, Steve Barker, Jen Pelkey, Jeff Turner, and Scott Ammons for all of their work and help in putting this event together. I also want to acknowledge my colleague Katie Hawkins at Outdoor Alliance California for all of her hard work, as well as the team at Outdoor Industry Association. Thank you for your support. This moment is special because it is when our industry comes together to take a leadership role in shaping policy on the California state level and turn awareness into advocacy and action. For the past couple of years, we've shown up in Sacramento for in-person meetings to raise awareness about outdoor recreation issues and build a collective voice for our industry. Although we are apart this year, we're still in this together. Right now, I hope you've got your coffee ready because we are going to kick it off with our morning jam event, sponsored by Wild Barn Coffee. Here's an ad from our sponsor. Cheers, Wild Barn. Thank you to Jenny and Alyssa at Wild Barn Coffee for helping us wake up and advocate. We're grateful to have a women-owned small business as a member of CORP and in support of outdoor recreation advocacy. While CORP is primarily supported by large outdoor recreation companies like the North Face and REI, it is really important for us to continue to grow this allyship across the industry with not only small businesses like Wild Barn Coffee, but also across the greater outdoor sports industry. Growing our allyship and welcoming others is exactly why we have invited Dr. Neftalie Williams to speak today about the importance of connecting skateboarding, policy, business, and urban culture. Equitable access is one of CORP's top priorities, and the crossover is only more apparent in skateboarding. Dr. Neftalie Williams is a sociologist who investigates global issues of diversity, identity, and youth empowerment, using the lens of action sports culture. Neftalie conducts research at the Annenberg School of Communication and Journalism at the University of Southern California, USC. He received his PhD from the University of Waikato in New Zealand through his dissertation, Color in the Lines, the Racial Politics and Possibilities of US Skateboarding Culture. His recent research with the 2019-2020 USC and Tony Hawk Foundation project was featured in both the LA Times and the New York Times. The project represented the first national effort to study the impact skateboarding has on young people's mental health and their educational and career trajectories. As the first ambassador of skateboarding, Neftalie introduced the concept of skateboarding as a tool for cultural diplomacy in both theory and practice. He aided the US Embassy in the Netherlands in integrating young Syrian refugees into the Netherlands. In Cambodia, his skate diplomacy efforts created new engagement between the US Embassy, Cambodian youth, and Cambodian academic and cultural institutions. As chairman of Cuba Skate, he created fruitful cultural exchanges between Cuban and American youth through skateboarding. To expand the public dialogue around diversity and inclusion, Neftalie founded the Nation Skate, a series of public panels, lectures, skateboarding demonstrations, and photography that explores the relationship between skateboarding, academia, and culture. As a public servant, he co-chairs the College Skateboarding Educational Foundation, CSEF, a nonprofit dedicated to creating scholarships for young skateboarders in pursuit of higher education. Now I'm going to show a short clip on Neftalie's work.
A recent study out of USC found that skaters of color, particularly African Americans, felt safer and that they were judged less harshly when they were carrying skateboards.
I mean, to me, that's amazing to actually see that they can feel that there's some safety, that there's some just level of security that's coming from them holding skateboards that they wouldn't have if they were holding a football or bouncing a basketball.
Neftalie Williams is the co-author of the study, funded by the Tony Hawk Foundation. He says it's evidence skateboarding can be a tool to create unity.
If we continue to push skateboarding and build a platform for skateboarding, that means that those are ways that people can come together, just have some little hint of beginning conversations or dialogues. And most importantly, it just keeps black people of color, alive.
He says the sport serves a unique role among many others because it's more of a lifestyle and an identity that bridges racial and economic divides.
And without further ado, joining us from the Netherlands, we have Dr. Neftalie Williams.
Thank you very much, Lexie. Thank you and good morning to everyone. Thank you for having me on, and I really appreciate having the opportunity to build and be part of the panels and part of your collective as you're reaching out to new allies within the action sports culture. As you were mentioning, and as mentioned during my intro, I've made it my life's work to really focus on the global skateboarding community and global skateboarding culture, and to really investigate how the process of an informal sporting culture, might provide the opportunity to build bridges between people from various backgrounds and from different cultures. So this particularly stems from my own experiences. And in that, I was growing up in Boston, Massachusetts, and I witnessed firsthand how a group of young teenagers who really had no reason to be friends or to investigate each other's backgrounds all found a love of skateboarding culture and decided that we needed to work together and to learn more about the sport and to participate. And we really figured out that we could learn a lot more together than alone. So for me, my work in research and skateboarding is really built from that space of seeing a collective growth from so many different backgrounds together. Now, my most recent PhD research, which you mentioned, which is being converted into a book now, is really looking at the role and history of people of color within the skateboarding community from the 1960s and 1970s to the present day. With skateboarding joining the Olympics in what will be in Tokyo 2021, it really seemed really important to focus on the lives and the people of color whose experience has helped shape global skateboarding culture and are responsible or partially responsible for building skateboarding to where it is, to having that global interest that even the Olympics would want us to be involved in. So I'm very excited about that. And within the book, I actually focus on looking at space and the importance of space and access, both for the families of elite skateboarders and communities of color, and in the growth as young amateur skateboarders become professional skaters. I really do talk and focus on how that access to space changes their lives and helps them become professional and become the elite level athletes that they do become. Now, one of my most recent projects that you mentioned was the Tony Hawk Foundation USC funded research, where we looked at the lives of over 2,500 different skateboarders. And in that, we looked at a small sample that was from 13 to 25. And what we saw there was that it had not changed, that young skaters were really focused on skateboarding and the benefits and mental and health mental well-being that came about when they had the opportunity to have space and have access to the skate park. One of the things that really stood out was that, in particular, that skaters of color felt that they were safer when they were carrying their skateboards, and they also felt that the skate park itself was a space where they could join people from different backgrounds who they might not normally meet in their lives. And in those spaces, they actually found some solidarity and found some community, much in the way that I did when I was growing up. That finding is really important. It relates to today's advocacy, because it really goes to the importance of having space for young people to figure out who they are and to learn and to build bridges between their communities. So that was a really, really important part of the study. But the other important part was that young skaters, actually, their mental health was improved they felt that it was improved while they were actually at the skate park themselves too. It was their major stress reliever. It was their way of just feeling that they were alive and that they had a community. And so looking at spaces like skate parks or open areas for young skateboarders is something that I've been focused on. And I really see a natural allyship to the work that you're doing. Now, people might ask, well, why have someone on who's focused on skateboarding? But there really is the need for space, the need for that stress relief and the improvement of mental health that occurs by creating space for young people. Now, I myself focus a lot on communities of color and understanding that there's often been a stereotype of who has the ability to have access to space, and truthfully, who's deserving of having space. And so, part of my goal with today's discussion and in joining the collective is really understanding that sometimes you need to see other people of color within those spaces, or you need to hear narratives that space belongs to everyone, that we should all have access to the outdoors, that we should all have parks that are built for us, and that there should be recreation areas for everyone to really enjoy what should be something that we all are allowed to embrace. Now, one of the other things that we looked at too is part of that stereotype creates limitations. It's a limitation of who's supposed to be allowed to have access to that space. And that's something that's really important to conquer and to help move us forward. And I think that that's something that we can all do together. That natural allyship is between skateboarding and action sports, which is, the Trinity, which could be skateboarding, snowboarding, surfing, also BMX, and the other sports that are done outdoors. We should be in a natural alliance with regular outdoor recreation in more traditional sports. And that can be, or more traditional activities like hiking, canoeing, and regular outdoor sports. We all need to have access to that space. And I think that this is a really, really good start to help bring us all together. One other thing that's really particularly important is that within skateboarding and action sports, you have so many young people. You have bright young people who are actually looking to be better global citizens and to engage and create the world that they want to see. And I think that that's something that's perfect for what you're working on right now with making sure that everyone has access to the outdoors. I believe that we bring a demographic that can be very, very important to you. And it's also important for us as action sports participants to also have, older adults or older, more established traditional advocacy groups in sporting spaces aligned, so that when we talk to our legislators, they see that it's an entire block, an entire group of people who are recognizing from 5 to 50, that we are the same in the sense that we all need access and that we all need to be able to participate in using those spaces in unique and interesting ways. Now, what I'd really like to see in the future is that we sort of build that relationship, and that allyship and the advocacy, so that we can work together to create space for everyone. You know, it's a really new ground where we can build upon what's happened in action sports and that sort of informal framework and move us forward into a space where we can be partnered with all of your institutions as well and really show that we can build a brighter future together. Now, we are going to have some space at the end to ask questions. So I do want to make sure that I can get all of your questions answered. And really to touch base and see how we can start to partner more in the future. If you have any questions, I'd love to hear them.
Great, thanks, Neftalie. And again, thanks for joining us from the Netherlands.
Yeah, no problem, no problem.
A little special. It's like you have this background in California, but you're all the way in the Netherlands tuning in, so it's awesome.
Yeah. Hey, we are together in this. As I said, I'm really excited to be with you and to really focus on how we can make space and make change for everyone. And even in being here in the Netherlands, being in Europe is you actually get the opportunity to see how they do things, and that in different European countries that the outdoor spaces, they are guaranteed, that they are fought for, that it is something that everyone feels is important. As a matter of fact, just looking at, to give you one quick anecdote, in different skate parks in the Netherlands, there are spaces that are right in front of City Hall where they've built skatable objects right in front of the City Hall because they respect young people as part of the city and that they want them to have spaces, yet also recognize that they are part of the city, not just an underground part of the city, but they are also there on the steps of City Hall so that they can be thinking about what global engagement's like, what does it mean to be a concerned and interested citizen. And that's something that we should see everywhere. I'd love to see that on the steps in Sacramento.
Yeah, definitely. All right, Neftalie, since this is a policy summit, let's go a bit further with these issues in your work. We've got some questions for you. The first I have is, when we first connected, you and I had a conversation about equitable access in regards to skateboarding, surfing, and specifically the inkwell in Santa Monica.
Yeah.
For those listening in that don't know the background on the inkwell and the history of surf access in Los Angeles, would you be willing to give an overview of that?
Yeah. You know, just to bring that to light, it's what was called the Inkwell was located in Santa Monica, and that was a space where particular African Americans had to use the beach and had access to that particular resource. Now, we like to think particularly that the beach is for everyone, that the space is open, but at that particular time in California history, that was not the case. And, or excuse me, it was the case, but the people who actually bought land in that, both at the Inkwell and in Manhattan Beach, were sort of pushed out. They were pushed out by people saying, like, we don't want to have all these African American people here, which was the reason it became known as the Inkwell, is because there were so many African American people who were there. But as always, you take something that's negative and turn it into a positive. And that was the space where African Americans knew that they could go and be safe on the beach. And the story of the Inkwell and also in other spaces in California was that African Americans and people of color were pushed out of those spaces. And for me, it really, not only does it hurt to know that those things happen, but it also creates a narrative that limits people of color and their imagination of what spaces they belong in. And so if you haven't seen yourself at the beach, you haven't seen your aunts and uncles and your grandparents at the beach, then you might think that the beach is not for you. And there are a lot of stereotypes and things like that that are out of who has access or who should have access. And so that's one of the things that we want to push back on, is making sure people understand that not only is the space for you, but everyone has a historic narrative of belonging to the beach. And we can connect back to those histories, and it's important to connect those if we want to move forward. As we want to gain more allies, we need to take the moment to say, here's where we have been, and here's how we can continue forward together.
Awesome.
That's a brief overview.
Brief overview of it. As a follow-up to that, why do you think so many urban culture kids turn to skateboarding rather than surfing?
Well, that really has a lot to do with the ease of access. Now, the thing about getting to the beach and having the beach as your playground, depending on where you are, I'll only use LA as an example, but depending on where you are in LA, it may take a while before you actually get to the beach. Let's say you're using public transportation, and that again goes to access. Can you bring your surfboard on the bus? Is that going to create too much commotion? You know, can you lug things around? To actually touch base into a more historic narrative, the first pro African-American skateboarder, Marty Grimes, when I was interviewing him, we had the discussion that he was a surfer first, but it took so long to get to the beach. He discussed that how the skaters who were on the west side had an advantage because they could kind of look out their windows to see if the surf was flat and decide if they were going to skate or if they were going to go surfing. He said it would take us longer to get there. So if it was a good day, sure. But if it was a bad day, you made a lot of effort. And so just naturally, they sort of moved to skateboarding. And so I think that still continues, is that skateboarding is a very low barrier to entry, and so many young people can get started with it, and they can skate to get to the beach. So you both have that transportation mode. That's something that is the sort of utilitarian function of the skateboard. Beyond culture, beyond all the other things, it still is a tool for transportation. So you can still surf to the beach, check and see if the beach is good, and if not, you can still go skating.
Awesome. Now, connecting this back to policy, do you think it is important to include specific language around access for communities of color in legislation today, especially when it comes to skateboarding and the outdoors?
I think it's very important. Again, it's a recognition of who has access and who should be allowed to have access. So having that written into that legislation, I think is very important, because it also becomes something that communities of color can then, if you would like us to advocate with you, then it's important to show that we are represented within the legislation itself. We see that there's a space for us, that people are thinking about us and our needs and in the benefits of the outdoors or open access. So having that built in the legislation is very important, because it allows us to actually use that and say, look, this is for us, regardless of what someone might think. We are here, we are present, we are in the legislation, we can use this as a tool for our communities, and in turn become the best allies with the work of everyone else.
Awesome. We're going to take some questions from our participants right now. And our first one is from Simone Cotter. Dr. Williams, can you please elaborate on the relationship between what are traditionally rural areas that support outdoor recreation and more urban areas that have a higher prevalence of skate parks and recreation centers? How can residents of rural areas be convinced that a skate park in a mountain town is a useful part of the community fabric?
Okay. So there's sort of two parts to that. So I'm just taking a little note. So being in the rural space, one, that becomes one of the places that it does become one of the most important, because there is not the urban ease of access, right? So there's a couple of different ways to look at this. As an advocate, one of the ways I look at it is, are you thinking through how your kids can be exercising and improve their mental health? And if you are, then you should be looking at all the things that kids are interested in. And if you're in a rural area, those young people are still interested in skateboarding. And I bet in any rural area, you can go to the local convenience store, the local space where there is some smooth paved ground, you will find young skateboarders. So depending on what approach you're using, one of the things you'll say is, listen, you want to make sure that these kids are in the space where they are actually have obstacles and things that are built for what they want to do, rather than just having them participate in this one section of sort of paved land in those rural areas. So that's one stance, is to say, like, this is a case to take care of them in a way where they actually have more access. The other is when I'm looking at people or talking to people who are really interested in getting young people moving. In these rural areas, we also know that, actually not just in rural areas, but in all areas, we know that young people are living a sedentary lifestyle. And so that's throughout the United States. So to move young people out of a sedentary lifestyle, it's important to create those spaces so that they can make sure that we're getting the obesity rate down, so we can make sure that we're getting their heart rate up, and that the other byproduct of building the skate park is letting kids from different backgrounds learn to work together within the same space. So that's sort of a variety of approaches of which the rural space the discussion can be converted to make sure that skate parks get built in that area.
Great. Yeah, I live in the Eastern Sierra, and I've told you we have the Balkan Brothers skate park here. We're lucky. Our community is very lucky to have that.
Yeah,
it's something to do in the off season from
snowboarding. Yeah, exactly. So they're really integral parts, like you said, having the skate park there. But it is, if a community is concerned about its young people, the skate park is one of the best things that they can put in, which will last, particularly in those rural areas, something that when you're pouring that cement will stay there for a long time. So it's sort of the gift that keeps on giving when they do decide to do that.
Absolutely. We have another question from Mike Van Man. How can we gain space for recreation without reducing the space needed for wildlife? For example, by taking a space away from motor vehicles, which are becoming obsolete.
So I want to make sure that how can we gain space without damaging wildlife?
Yeah, I think it's more of a biodiversity.
Yeah, no, that's an interesting question. As a matter of fact, that's sort of a different question, one that I encounter less, because let's look in particular, like let's say like the Venice skate park. Often skate parks, I mean, the first thing that should always be done is that we should be doing, looking and doing an environmental study and an environmental impact study and for any skate park. So that's just that goes without a doubt. But one of the good things about skateboarding is when we look at what's actually used in the most popular obstacles that young skaters skate, most of them are street skaters. So those things are built on ledges, benches, stairs, and things that are in particular are part of the urban environment. So it's less of a, let's say it would be less obtrusive to that sort of environmental factor, because we actually like to skate the things that are part of the city already. So we skate tennis courts. You can take a tennis court that is already, things that have already been given access. And that's sort of the difference in skateboarding. We're not asking you to cut down trees and make space for a park. We're asking you to just give us the open leftover areas in the first place so that we can utilize those to begin with. That's just at a base level. But if we're actually going to start to get into the design of the park, I'm actually a firm believer in that when we design that urban space or that space that is cement, that we look at the impact and we also build in those green spaces. We actually want more people to be hiking by or moving by and utilizing the space. It should not just be the skate park, but there should be picnic space. There should be space for other things as well. And that's actually something that the Tony Hawk Foundation, which is now known as the Skate Park Project, has really focused on as well. We want to make sure that we're not thinking that young people just need to be stuck off in a corner near the police station, which is something that happens often. Like, oh, those young people, we've got to make sure to heavily police them and put them in spaces that no one wants. That's not what we want. And that kids understand when you do that. When you do that to them, they understand that they're marginalized and that they are not important. And I think that's a key thing for all adults to understand, is they see where you put them and they will hold that. They know that. They know you put them near the police station or you put them in a place that no one else wants to be in. So it's very important when we think about how we want young people to feel like they are part of the citizenship, or that they are part of the city or the town or part of the community. Then you need to put those things in together. And that goes to that question about, it's sort of biodiversity. And well, we want it to be diverse in all of those spaces. We want people to be able to enjoy nature. We want people to be able to enjoy skateboarding so that they can see that nature and skateboarding and enjoyment of the outdoors are all things that belong together.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I really like what you said about using spaces that we have, refurbishing areas, not by the police station, but that are central to our areas. Yeah,
that's that's one of the good things about skateboarding, and it being something that's spurred in the sort of urban environment, because we have a lot of urban environments. We actually maybe need less urban environment, as we know, to create new spaces. But that's the opportunity. Everyone who gets on the advocacy call and meeting today should be thinking about that. When they're building a skate park, it shouldn't just be, oh, the kids down the street are trying to get a skate park done and I don't know any skateboarders. You should be involved in that so that you can create more green spaces around them and actually create more space for your fellow members of the city or town, but also make those kids feel like all of these things are important at the same time.
Absolutely. We have a question from Teresa Simon with American Whitewater. She's curious whether gender was considered in your studies.
Yes, as a matter of fact, we did. In particular, the entire Tony Hawk USC study is available online, and I can send out a link there. And one of the things that we were looking at in particular was that while gender is still the most salient, or was the most salient identity that women felt more so than race, which is in our study, we really did look at race sort of top of mind, but we were also looking at, most importantly, was how people viewed their identities. We wanted to see what they thought was the most important. Was it that they were African American, or was it that they were a skateboarder first and foremost? Or was it that, that, let's say, if it was about disability, that's how they thought people judged them, and how the skateboarding populace around judged them. So gender played out in that, as well as a lot of people said, a lot of the women who were involved in the study said, while race is important to me, gender is the way that I think that people view me first of all. That's sort of the number one space. So that was definitely something we considered, and we let people tell us how their lives were lived. And then those are the things that we reported on.
Very interesting. We have another question from Wendy Carey at Serious Innovation. She's asking, how do we get the word to the streets so we're not talking to ourselves?
That's a bit broad, but I would think that in particular, if it's about in advocacy in this way, it's really about developing new partnerships and new allyships with young people or with the groups that you share natural synergy with. I mean, all young skateboarders, snowboarders, surfers are focused on the outdoors, right? They're looking for that space and they want to have access. So to really get the word out to the streets, you've got to partner with them and truthfully let them know that they matter to you. And when you do that, that's always the first step in building allyship, is showing people that you care about them. And that's in inviting them to the table. My interest in this today really does come from, I want to make sure that more communities of color have access to all the resources, all the natural resources, all the space. I want all young people to feel that we care about them. And so if we want them to feel like we care about them, then we have to go take it to the people. So, we start with forums like this, and we go out and we build more allyships by putting your money where your mouth is and saying, this is important to us. We will sponsor those events that they're doing. We want to be part of their lives and their discussions. And so I think that's the first few formative steps.
Yeah, this is only the tip of the iceberg, bringing in the skate industry to us now.
Yes.
We have a question from Alexander Meyerhoff. He said, excellent Dogtown reference. How important is... I think you touched a little bit on this, but how important is skateboarding as a means of access and transportation for young people without access to automobiles or public transportation?
Oh, that's great that you brought that up specifically, because that was something, who asked that question?
Alexander Meyerhoff.
Okay, Alexander, that was great. Just in the case that is sort of the beauty of the skateboard, is that it still is that utilitarian tool. And it is still for transportation, even if we don't get involved in the culture, the art side, the business side. Without those things, it's just a way to move forward. And that's something that I always think about. So, I mean, it's really a case of understanding that in any discussion, it should always be based on moving stereotypes or preconceived notions about what skateboarding is, to even just bring it down to its core, to go, we want less people in cars. We should have more people riding skateboards. We should have more people seeking alternative forms of transportation. So in that is a natural dialogue to creating new spaces. I'm in Amsterdam, and in the Netherlands, this city in this country is formed and built upon biking. So just to bring that back to that US context and the importance of thinking globally and how we can learn from that, I mean, that's a key function, is that there's a bike lane for everyone, and that the bikes have the right of way, and people skateboard on those paths as well, and that they still do also build skate parks, and they try to create space for all their citizens, and that does have an impact on their carbon footprint. So I think that that's really it, is that we just need to continue to discuss skateboarding as an alternative transportation mode. And to be honest with you, I think that has what's really been one of the things that has grown exponentially in skateboarding culture. But then let's say the last 5 years, and I can tell you specifically from being at USC on campus, and I can tell you that 7 years ago, what USC looked like with just a few skateboarders pushing around, they were skateboarders who were more skateboarders looking to do tricks, to now on campus, everyone rides a skateboard, a longboard, a short board, a small board, well, whatever board they can to get back and forth. And there's been a real big push that, hey, I want to cut down on my carbon footprint. I still want to get to class on time. I don't want to have so many bikes because there's too many kids. So I'm just going to get a skateboard. And I will say I'm just thinking at Hoover and the intersection of Hoover, and I apologize, I can't think of the other street, but at the Hoover intersection at USC, that actual side of the street has been closed to move from 2 lanes down to 1 lane to make way so that you can have more pedestrian walking, and that more people on skateboards and on bikes, and the university has responded in that particular instance to close off the road, make it easier. And I know there's people in cars that have complained saying, what happened to the other lane? Why are we giving this space? But that's a growth. That's the way it should be. We should be working towards creating a more beneficial environment for everyone.
Yeah, that's a great way to cut down your carbon footprint. I like it. So we're going to shift gears a little bit. Neftalie, your career has revolved around your passion, skateboarding. Do you have any advice for anyone looking to connect their own career with their passion, whether it's surfing, rock climbing, fly fishing, or the outdoors in general?
You know, I do, in the sense that the key thing is defining the thing that you love and then figuring out how it connects to broader issues and problems that the world face. I mean, I love skateboarding, and I recognize that the world is not being as just as it could be. And I've seen that skateboarding has a space where it's not saying that everything is perfect. It's just saying that there's the possibility to develop, to develop relationships between people based on a love of a shared experience. Well, I'm doing skateboarding, but it could be fly fishing, it could be barbecuing, it could be anything that people that you feel passionate about. But really, it's really important to step back for a moment and think about, well, what is going on here that really can make the world better? How can it just add a blueprint or a space where we're connect to these broader topics? And as soon as you do that, the thing you love now becomes much more important and actually speaks to a lot to greater things.
Awesome. I love all that. Just follow your passion but find the connection to make the world a better place with it.
Yeah.
So we're going to wrap up here. But before you go, where can our listeners find you online and connect with your work?
Okay. Well, the easiest way is they can just go to neftalie.com, www.neftalie.com.
And how do you want our industry to get involved with you?
Oh, what I think what's really important is sort of the work that I'm doing with the Tony Hawk Foundation and the Skate Park Project. I believe there's a natural allyship there where we can really move forward to creating more space and more access. And also in developing the larger community discussion with people of color, and letting them know that you're interested in their lives and the ways that we know that the outdoors and using new spaces will remarkably lower the level of stress that people face and give them the moment to reflect and actually think of themselves in new ways. So that's exactly where we can start building those.
Thank you so much for taking time out of your day. I know it's evening there, so I'll let you get back to your family, but
No problem.
you. And now we're going to bring on Matt Lyon, our board president at Corp, who's also the CEO of HydroPack, and he's going to review our day and go through the agenda.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Great. Am I on?
You are on, Matt,
Okay,
and
perfect.
the agenda now.
Okay, perfect. Well, thank you, Dr. Williams. That was great. I can tell you the number of times I've been sitting around talking about policy discussions, and it's come up when we talk about equitable access to parks and open spaces, about underparked communities, and also just the proximity to parks as far as distances. It's great to hear from someone that really is tackling that, really at the roots level of creating those parks and coming up with solutions on the ground that address those issues. So very refreshing. Great to hear from Dr. Williams. So welcome to the 3rd Annual Sacramento Summit. On behalf of the Board of California Outdoor Recreation Partnership, we're thrilled to have over 100 participants from around the state join us today for this virtual advocacy day. I'd like to say this year's summit is possible because of the ongoing partnership between Corp, the Outdoor Industry Association, and the Outdoor Alliance. Together, we brought advocates to Sacramento, physically and virtually, over the last 3 years to raise awareness about the outdoor recreation issues and to build the collective voice for the recreation industry and partners. So thank you to our 2 co-hosts today. I'd just like to give you a preview of what to expect. Thinking about so we'll start off at the 9 o'clock hour. And just a quick note, we're trying to allow about 5 minutes between each session. So wrap things up at about, for example, right now at 8:55 before the 9 o'clock start. Give everybody 5 minutes if you need coffee. Thank you, Wild Brew, for coffee this morning. Or if you need to take a nature break or even check emails, we are trying to allow that because we do realize it's quite a full day. But at 9 o'clock, we'll kick off with some statements from our 3 sponsors. So Corp, Lisa Angenbrug from OIA and Adam Kramer from Outdoor Alliance, and then we'll have a little discussion session. At 10 o'clock, we jump into our first set of government speakers, which we're delighted today to have our California Natural Resources Secretary, Wade Crowfoot, and Undersecretary, Angela Barranco, both speak to us and answer a few questions, and then Assemblymember Ash Kalra from the San Jose area. So all key people in our natural resources discussion in the state level. At 11 o'clock, we'll have our first panel, and this is the first time we're today. One of our main topics is inclusivity. Our panel, moderated by Vipe Desai, will be directly addressing challenges that we face as an outdoor community in making it open and welcoming to all people, and how others are experiencing this community, essentially laying out some of the challenges that we're facing. So very vibrant panel, looking forward to that at 11. We'll have a half-hour break at noon for lunch. And then at 12:30, we're bringing on a couple of our good friends, Assembly members Laura Friedman and Assemblymember Eduardo Garcia. We worked with both in the past with bills in front of the legislature in Sacramento, and they're both working on some important legislation that we're looking to get behind for next year as well. So don't miss their talks at 12:30. 1 o'clock, we'll have our second panel talking about inclusivity and equitable access. This panel focused a little more on, I guess we'd say, outdoor advocacy wins. So some of the legislative solutions and positive aspects that our industry has promoted to try to address these inclusivity issues. This will be moderated by Eric Raymond with the North Face, who's also a board member at Corp. And at 2 o'clock, we're gonna switch gears from the inclusivity subject, start talking about advocacy and how we can advocate for the issues that we're supporting here in this current environment. So how to advocate virtually. That'll be moderated by Kenji Haratunian, who is also a member of the Corp board, talking about really as we start gearing up, the last legislative session is over. but we're looking forward to what we can do for 2021. So we'll imagine that most of these things will continue to be virtual, but that making sure that we connect virtually with our local legislators is going to be a critical part of this process as we start up the year. And then as we start to wrap up the day, 3 o'clock, our lobbying consultant, Doug Houston from Houston Magnani Associates, will be giving us a wrap up of the legislation that was presented and what happened to it this year during the 2020 session, talk a little bit about what's coming up in 2021. Doug and his partner, Tracy Verardo Torres, have worked with us for the last several years with Outdoor Industry Association and Corp on pushing legislation in Sacramento. And if you've been to our Sacramento Summits in person before, you've met them already. Then at 3:15, we're going to be switching gears today. We'd like to do a mock advocacy, so our virtual advocacy mock session, where we're going to just kind of get together in small groups, practice kind of going through some, introducing yourself, hitting on some topics, how we coordinate ourselves and our activities as we're going to be doing these mock visits to legislatures, or sorry, virtual visits to legislatures as we get into the 2021 session. To facilitate this, we're going to have to leave our current webinar format and move over to the Zoom meetings format to allow for the breakout rooms and the discussions. So what we'll do is at 3:15, we'll do kind of a wrap up, a formal wrap up of this webinar, and we'll stop the recording of the webinar, and then we'll ask everyone to click on the link over to the Zoom meetings platform, and there we'll go ahead and have the mock virtual lobbying sessions, and then afterwards we've got a few other things planned. We're calling a virtual happy hour. We've got a sponsor, Sufferfest beer as our sponsor of our happy hour, and we'll start off with a presentation from one of our North Place athlete about making a plan to vote, and then we'll go into just some general networking time until 5 o'clock close. So full day in front of us. And I believe we have the Q&A session already working. So if you have questions for speakers as we go along, please go ahead and enter them in the question and answer session. And to the extent that we can, we'll be able to try to address those. We do anticipate time being short with some of our speakers, so we might not be able to get to all the questions. I apologize in advance, but hopefully we'll get to some. So great. I'm going to sign off now, give everyone a few minutes, and we'll come back at the top of the hour at 9 o'clock, and we'll start off with some of our host organizations speaks. Thank you.